All right, welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns, and I have Dr. Lisa with me on Dr. King's week, day, month. We could throw all of it in there, obviously, but really excited to get on the mic with you, Dr. Lisa. How
hmm
are things going?
Good, snowy and cold in Colorado.
Uh-huh.
And I also just feel like the first couple of weeks of January have been
Oh my. Mm-hmm.
completely wild. So I feel a little discombobulated. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like I just want to get into like a pair of pajamas and sit under a blanket permanently.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Well, and what gets me too is that I saw some memes at the beginning of the month and around the first week or so of the month that said, "Okay, my free 7-day trial is over. I want to cancel
Yes,
on
I saw that one. I thought it was
2026."
great. Yeah.
Thought that was the best. I'm like,
hmm
yeah, I'm with you. I
Yeah,
am with
refund.
you.
hmm
Refund. That's right. Exactly. Oh, so yeah, I'm there already. And Lisa, we're here yet again because we felt this way pretty much exactly a year ago this time when we were getting
Yep.
obliterated with
Yep.
executive orders. But now we've got some stuff that let's just say humanity is not the priority around these parts, Lisa.
Yeah, it
So
seems so.
yeah, and especially important for us to talk about those humanitarian topics, especially this week as we hope to honor Dr. King on so many days, not just one, obviously, but to honor his birthday. I'm not going to bust out into my Stevie Wonder version of Happy Birthday right now, but y'all know where we're going with that. But let's dive into our word of the week. So this week, Lisa, ironically, before all the happenings that we're going to discuss today even occurred, a word jumped off the page for me that I dropped in our notes so that we wouldn't forget to circle back to it. And if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the word is humanophile. Humanophile. Forgive me if y'all know this word and have heard it before and I haven't, but I never get uncomfortable by pronouncing a word that I learned while reading. So I've never heard anybody say this word, but there it is, humanophile, if I'm correct. And Heidi Phillips coined this word during the World Economic Forum session, where it really resonated with folks as someone who seeks out remarkable, diverse human beings. I think what's really interesting about this word is that we always seem to be looking for individuals that live up to this type of, how can I say, avatar, profile, characteristics. And that's partially because when we think of humanist, humanism, so forth, there's a lot of language that goes along with that. But it kind of reminds me, Lisa, of someone who's a bibliophile, right? Where they look for rare books, they look for rare text and so forth. Actually being cognizant and aware enough to look for someone, a human being that is rare, that is different from the others, that's willing to do something that would seem odd in a certain context, but it's appropriate for where they are. And so I think what's really cool about this word is that Heidi Phillips actually realized after starting to use this word and looking for people who would fill that role of a unique human being, the people that we call rare often aren't rare at all. They're just simply less recognized. Usually they're less accommodated and they are less valued in systems designed around what's considered typical, right? So think about how all that plays out, right? So when you think about a Dr. King, right? Let nobody confuse you about Dr. King and his the fitting approach of people looking for a humanophile, but being in a context where they were less recognized, less accommodated. Obviously, he was not accommodated because his life was taken. So the system that he was in was not conducive to what he represented. And so I'm really curious and always interested about this work, Lisa, because it allows us to pay attention to the folks that don't want to fit in, and hopefully for good. And so, with that, how can we kind of pick up on what they've called odd individuals? It's a British term, Lisa, odd bod. So, those individuals that are strange or different. Who are the folks that are strange and different around us, but maybe we want to model some of our actions and our perspectives around their oddity because our context isn't what it should be anyway. So, have you heard this word before, Lisa, humanophile?
I have not. Only it just makes me think of like Francophile or Anglophile, right?
Ah, yeah, yeah,
Lovers
yeah,
of
yeah.
French and English. And so, but what you're saying is it's not someone who loves humans or the diversity of humans or all things human. It's someone who's actually looking specifically to be in community with lots of different people, right? To learn
Mm-hmm.
from and engage with folks who might otherwise be considered atypical.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay.
valuing it, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, we can see that. That's one of the things I really appreciate about my oldest is that fortunately, I didn't have to say, Trey, you are not less than because of ADHD or because of autism or other things. You are really fitting into this notion of value. I'm going to value this person
Mm-hmm.
because they see the world differently. I didn't have to walk him through that. He found that some kind of way. And I just wish we could as society, could we find
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
in other people rather than ostracizing or trying to remove them from our society because of what they represent. So,
Right. Right.
but all right, well,
Okay.
let's get into our one and only phase, right?
Yes. So we are doing a solo phase again because we just feel like these keep popping up. So probably unsurprisingly, we wanted to talk about the murder of Renee Good in Minneapolis here in early January. So we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time recapping it, or I'm going to do a little sketch here of the history, and then we're going to talk more about the lessons and takeaways and that sort of thing to help us kind of think through, where we go from here. So for those of you who haven't been fully on board paying attention, is there's actually a little bit of a backstory here. So there has been recently in the news a lot of attention paid to Minnesota and some welfare program fraud that has emerged, primarily perpetrated or allegedly perpetrated by members of the Somali community. Now, there's been in Minnesota problems and concerns around welfare program fraud for over a decade, so this isn't really new, but it kind of escalated because this right-wing influencer did a little video, visited these daycare places, which he wasn't then let into. Shocker, random man shows up to a childcare place and says, hey, can I come in? Where are your children? And you don't get let in. Like that feels pretty like normal. Anyway, that went viral. The Trump administration responds. And then also what was happening kind of around the same time is, if you recall, President Trump himself had said some pretty awful racist and xenophobic stuff about Somali Americans and Somali immigrants. So that's the backstory. That precipitated a massive influx of ICE agents recently into Minneapolis. 2,000, I think, ICE agents, with this kind of express purpose of like rooting out Somali immigrants who are here without appropriate paperwork and essentially deporting them, right? And it was all tied into this rhetoric of how bad Somali immigrants are and the fraud and such, which there's a kernel of truth in there related to the fraud, but of course it's all been blown up in a racist and xenophobic way. Cue an interaction that happened on a Minneapolis suburban street with Renee Good, who was in her car having dropped off her 6-year-old at school. ICE agents pulled up, got out of the car, tried to get her out of the car, used an expletive to tell her to move and get out of the car, so she had conflicting information. And ultimately, she tried to pull away, and in her pulling away, one of the ICE officers shot her 3 times. So once through the front of the car and twice through the window. And she died. And there was a physician on scene, and he was prevented from providing care. And ultimately, whether or not the care that could have been provided in that moment would have saved her life, I don't know. But there was a delay in her getting care. Anyway, many, many videos of this. You've probably seen them, right? And just recently, a video that from the actual ICE officer's body cam was released, so you could see kind of from their perspective. But there have been a lot of competing narratives coming out. Most notably, President Trump, before these videos went widespread, said, quote, "It's a horrible thing to watch. The woman screaming was obviously a professional agitator, and the woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer, who seems to have shot her in self-defense. He also said that this ICE officer is lucky to be alive." From what we can see is the ICE officer wasn't touched by the car at all, and I think the car was maybe moving 2 miles an hour when it was moving in the first place. Kristi Noem, Department of Homeland Security head, also gave a narrative that was completely untethered from reality, as did J.D. Vance. So we are now kind of sitting in the aftermath of that. Should note that she is a white woman, 37 years old, mother of 3. One of her children is now orphaned because that child's father died in a couple of years ago, and so now has lost his mother also. And this all occurred about a mile from where George Floyd was also murdered. So, quick synopsis, that's kind of the background. What do you think, Shauna? I know we've texted a little bit about this, but how is this all landing on you? What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah. I initially heard about this. It might have been your text or one other text that made me aware of it, but it was also close to bedtime. And I have learned absolutely be aware of what's going on in the world, but also filter based on where you are in your day. If it is nighttime, I'm not looking at any of this. I'm not looking at the plane crashes. I'm not looking at bridges falling down. I'm not looking at none of that stuff because there goes my decent night of sleep that I need in order to give attention to such matters in the work that we do the day following. So let me just say that, number one.
Yep.
But even as I found out more about the situation, I did watch multiple angles of the video itself, finding out more about her. I jokingly yet not jokingly put on my on one of my social media accounts. This is kind of like those safety signs that says how many days we are without incident.
Oh, uh-huh.
Back to zero for me. Back to zero
Yep.
in my brain when it comes to incidences, responses to this. Um, it just doesn't let up. The ironies that I found with it, and lessons to be learned. Um, I can see why there are so many people taking it to the street in Minneapolis because
Mm-hmm.
here's the history. I mean, we know what happened in 2020 and how that literally became a global movement
Yep.
to give
Yep.
attention to the civil rights of Americans and people around the world as well in parallel. So that's one thing. The other thing that I thought about too, though, Lisa, is we can't overlook the history that comes along with this. And I hate to say this, Lisa, because we've had episodes where we've been talking about freedom dreaming, and here I go again, kind of
Yeah.
looking a little bit in hindsight. But what is important is that as much as I want this to be a new day, it's not a new day. Because when we go back and look at the United States broadly,
Mm-hmm.
civil rights broadly, the history of violence in civil rights movements. And then if we want to drill down specifically into the history of violence against white allies, this is not, sadly, it's not unusual, yet it is unusual, right? We
Mm-hmm.
have a history of this in the United States. I talked about her before on this podcast, Joan Trumpauer Holland, who was very active in the civil rights movement, was a freedom rider, and went through a lot of violence broadly, but also personally in being disowned by her own family. as a result of standing up and supporting civil rights. Her book literally is called She Stood for Freedom. And her son Loki talks about her story constantly to remind people this is the requirement of being an ally. Now, fortunately, Joan is still with us, but we can't say that about other white allies and specifically white women allies. Heather Heyer, if I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, but Charlottesville and everything that happened there and literally being run
Yep.
over by a
Mm-hmm.
car. That's another one. We can go down the laundry list. Michael Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, James Reed, Viola Liuzzo, who I believe that's how her last name is spelled. I've only read her name in books as well, but these are individuals who have fallen as a result of violence around civil rights. And so with this, um, you know, I weep in this because on one hand, I'm thinking to myself, as usual, I never feel like things need to get to this point with anyone needing to lose their life. And at the same time, Lisa, we know how this has gone and how it will go. The people that I just listed previously, hindsight is always interesting because now that we've had some years to pass,
Mm-hmm.
many people would say these individuals are heroes,
Right.
right? It's too fresh for people who are not familiar with history to say that Renee Good would be part and parcel with that history of white allies who would be considered heroic in some way, shape, or form. The kindness that she showed, even in her last words, there are going to be some people that throw that out and
Mm-hmm.
make every excuse in the book why, oh, it didn't have to happen if she had just complied. Well, like you said, comply with what? Because even she was given mixed messages, right? So which one do you comply with? Getting out of what do you do exactly, especially in that moment? I think, especially with white folks and then drill down to white women, are you comfortable looking at those photos afterwards where her car literally hit another car and I believe a light pole afterwards, hard
Mm-hmm.
enough that the airbags were deployed and the open door with a
Yeah.
bloodied airbag? Are you comfortable looking at that photo and number one, saying that this is the country that you want? Or number two, if you're an ally, are you willing to be that person? I doubt very seriously you're willing to do that. If you are a empathetic, logical thinking person, which Lisa, I know that's asking a whole lot in today's United States of America, but do you really want that? And so I appreciate, let me just say now, I appreciate the white women that I know who have been horrified, who have named specifically that, all right, y'all try to get cute with, oh, well, I'm an ally. I'm going to put on my cool t-shirt and take my sign and go march in my local neighborhood on this particular topic. That's cute allyship, but what is this allyship?
Mm-hmm.
And are you willing to go there? I know that's a hard question because it's in the moment, but that is the spectrum of allyship that we are now in. A cute t-shirt and a sign at a protest
Right.
may just simply be the tip of a larger iceberg.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard question, right? I'm sure Renee Good wasn't providing legal observation, as I understand, that she
Right.
was doing in that moment, thinking that her life was going to end that day, right?
That's right.
But
That's
but
right.
certainly, I mean, I would not, if I were engaging with ICE, like I'm definitely cognizant that there's a risk because they're so trigger happy and so power hungry. And clearly, not all of them. I mean, I don't know all of them. I do know the campaign, the advertising campaign for them to hire new ICE officers and the reduced training does not make me
Hmm.
feel very confident. But this individual who murdered Renee Good obviously doesn't have much of a moral compass. And, what's interesting is, J.D. Vance in his horrible, chilling spin of this
Hmm.
said that it wouldn't be surprising that this particular officer was a little antsy or a little jumpy at the notion of being hit by a car because previously, 6 weeks, 2 months ago, I guess, he was actually hit by a car and had spent some time in hospital. I don't know the exact details. And so Vance offered that up as a justification as to why he pulled the trigger. Now, my response to that, and I think yours too, Shauna, is, well, he might have had a trauma response to that prior encounter, and he clearly wasn't ready to be out on the street, because you
Hello.
are a federal officer and you need to not overreact in these situations. And if your trauma is leading you to overact and now a woman is dead, then
Mhm.
that's a huge problem, right?
Oh yeah.
So I
Oh yeah.
think I think this is actually going to have the reverse effect. I think it is catalyzing now, but I think less people are
Mm.
ultimately going to stand up in a like physically put their bodies in
Mm-hmm.
the way, like less white people I think are going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what the administration wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
other thing that I would say that's kind of operating like simultaneously is, so she's a white woman, so that is enhancing people's response to it, right? If she were a woman of color, it probably wouldn't be that big. It wouldn't be as big of a thing,
Mm-hmm.
because there have been women of color who have been shot by ICE agents. Side note: 9 people have been killed, murdered by ICE since September. That she's also quite relatable. 37, mom. People have really nice things to say about her, right? She was
Yeah,
just dropping her
mom,
kid at
wife.
school.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I think there's nervousness that because she is this kind of suburban, she might have even been a stay-at-home mom, that that is going to create a relatability
Mm-hmm.
with a
Mm-hmm.
large group of Trump voters, because we know that white women voted for Trump more than half,
Well,
right?
and we know that. I would love to know if GoFundMe tracks that information, because the family opened up a fundraiser campaign. And I think the goal was around 50K, and they ended up reaching 1.5 million in donations, and eventually, shut it down and said, hey, please give to other charities of your choice, which I did in response, because by the time I found out about it, it was closed already because of the overwhelming response. And the family stated that the money itself would go into a trust fund for the family. To me, I don't care if you only gave $1. That's in support of Renee, her family, and anti what just occurred, anti uh, militia-ish
Yeah,
violence against an
yeah.
individual. And so I think those dollars in my mind, just like when you're, donating in an election, to me, they are voting for something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love to see the demographics on that. But anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Who's given and how many people, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's exactly right. So, I think it's also extremely telling the response of Minneapolis and
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota broadly, and how this occurred, 1 mile from where George Floyd was murdered by police officer Derek Chauvin. And so, having protesters there, tear gas, pepper spray, all kinds of stuff, snowball, even snowballs. I'm concerned about the people of Minneapolis, where, yes, they should be very careful, but at the same time, like you said, I don't want this to throw cold water on
Mm-hmm.
their motivations around the changes that many of us want in this country. And there's been protests that have been popping up in other places too, not just Minneapolis. I mean, Buffalo, Chapel Hill, Durham, Kansas City, LA.
Yeah,
How similar does that sound?
yeah.
Right? To our experience around George Floyd. And so, with that, I think, Lisa, if I had to kind of boil down some lessons learned,
Mm-hmm.
because I get it when I'm thinking about these instances that are occurring. I've shared this with you before, Lisa. My response, pre-parenthood and pre-responsibility, would be quite different as to what it is now, because
Right,
God
right.
rest her soul, with Renee, she didn't get to go home. I need to get home to mine. So I get
Yeah.
that piece, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not the only way to protest, to intercept, to make clear how we feel about this type of militia-ish behavior on people that simply have a difference of opinion. Having a difference of opinion should not cost you your life. It should not, whether you're
Right.
just a general resident, a politician, no. So deadly force is problematic to me. And let's wait for it, Lisa. Let's wait for all the people that take all of that video footage and someone who disagrees with how that video footage is being interpreted tries to tell us that AI or some other manufactured bullshit is floating out there, but Renee was the real problem.
Right. I mean, they're already doing that, right? It's like a little
Of
bit
course.
of a Rorschach test, right? Where depending on
Yes.
your political position or ideology, you're looking at the same video and walking away with different things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's astounding, really, because I don't think I don't know how you watch those videos and all those different angles and you hear the ICE officer say effing bitch after he shot her and he walks away and he hasn't been touched by the car. I don't know how you watch that and come away with it was self-defense. She was a deranged leftist who was
Right.
impeding ICE operations. It's just it's just not true. Like, and so I think I've seen a dozen times that George Orwell quote that I think I've used on this podcast and posted myself around like the final
Mm-hmm.
something was like, don't believe what your ears and your eyes tell you or something. I'm very much
Mm-hmm.
butchering that quote, but
Mm-hmm.
that's what the federal government is doing is they're perpetrating this other narrative. So it's just like gaslighting on steroids, right? In terms of
Mm-hmm.
so then
Mm-hmm.
you're primed to watch the material. So that AI piece that you just suggested, I think you're 100% spot on that we haven't gotten there yet, but I will bet money that there is going to start to be this narrative about, well, those videos they've been doctored, right? They're not real
Oh, of
videos. That's not
course.
actually what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we're just, it's just going to snowball, but it does make me nervous about whether it's going to throw cold water on more physical engagement of resistance versus I'm going to give money to this campaign or I'm going to go to a No Kings rally and just stand on the side honking my horn or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah,
But
yeah.
I just, I mean, I don't know. This office is probably not going to be held accountable because the Minnesota police and their version of the FBI has been shut out. So you've now got the federal government, the only entity investigating an abuse of power by the federal government is the federal government. So, I mean, like, could you get any
Yeah.
more, like, totalitarian, authoritarian than that, right? Like, there's, like, no external, neutral-ish party that is looking into that. And we know it's already monumentally
Mm-hmm.
challenging to hold law enforcement officers
Mm-hmm.
accountable for their excessive force in a court of law. And then you've got JD Vance saying that ICE officers have full immunity, and that's just legally not true. They do not have immunity, right? But how many people are going to believe that? Because they don't know, right? So they're going to say, oh, well, shit, this woman got killed and she didn't do anything. Um, they have immunity, so no one's going to get held accountable. And I have kids at home. It just feels too
Sick,
risky. Yeah.
which is sick. It's so sick. It's so sick. And so, with that, so Lisa, let's wrap our time up with maybe some possible lessons learned with this. I will say continue to resist in your own way,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like, because I never, ever, I mean, never want to paint resistance as only being one way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. The other thing is continue to speak the truth. Continue to speak the truth. I remember there was this movie that Denzel Washington played in a long time ago in New Orleans where it was called the I don't know if it was AI or what technology it was. It was called Snow White because it was able to see from seven different directions the very same thing.
Okay.
And so you could see all the angles of an issue that happened in the past or in the future in ways that you could adjust, right? Well, we already talked about the history of white allyship or just allyship in general when it comes to civil rights. We know the seven different angles of the past. We know what that looks like. Let's not forget to apply that to this and
Mm-hmm.
future instances. God forbid someone else loses their life, but where we are currently, it would not be out of character for this to happen. So pay attention to what's going on, who's able to help, who's not able to help. What are you filming? What are you not filming? Lisa, as much as it sounds ridiculous, I think I was most deeply disturbed by the visual of the doctor that attempted to attend to her,
Mm-hmm.
the now trauma that he probably has to manage, knowing that, again, like to your point, maybe he could have done something, but now we'll never know.
Right.
So resisting in different ways, taking lessons and applying them to the future. And, lastly, I'll go back to say, Lisa, back to our humanophile language. Always look for that odd person out, that individual that's willing to do what maybe other people aren't willing to do. Because guess what? The Renee Goods of the world are the people who I believe are the most normal in this effed up
Mm.
country right now. They're the ones that attempt to drive away after saying, hey, you're good. I'm not mad at you, dude. Right before bullets start to fly. That's normal.
Right.
Renee Good is normal and human. The context around her was not. And I think my biggest fear, Lisa, just building upon the imagination episode and vision, freedom dreaming, is that we start to normalize what was around Renee rather than normalizing Renee and the other protesters there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be there. There's a particular Christian scripture that talks about being in the world but not of the world. I feel like Renee and the other protested that were similarly minded were in the world, but certainly they're trying not to be of this American world that is now being created. They're
Mm-hmm.
desperately trying not to be of it. And I think that's the challenge, probably for another couple of generations, considering what's occurring.
Yeah. And for me, I think one of the big lessons is, I've gone on a rant about the extrajudicial killings, also known as
Mm.
murder, in the boats in the
Hmm.
Pacific and the Caribbean,
Hmm.
and how, I mean, there's over 100 people now, I think, who have been murdered. And there obviously, as we mentioned, multiple people have been shot and killed in many in moving cars, which is just as an aside not a
Yeah.
recommended practice for law enforcement because
Right, right.
it's dangerous. Um, and how the executive power is what we're normalizing is the use of fatal actions, so deadly
Hmm.
force, I guess, and that is
Hmm.
becoming normalized. First, it was these
Hmm.
quote unquote drug dealers at sea who have very little value or are presumed
Yes.
to have very little value. And so it's okay to violate their rights. It's okay to execute them without a trial, right?
Mm.
And now we're kind of moving in to the United States where we have citizens and non-citizens who are now physically harmed and even dying, and how this kind of slow march to normalization of that behavior as those bounds of executive power keep getting nudged and nudged. And so people are just being like, oh, well, she shouldn't have been there. Well, okay, as though
Hmm.
execution, public execution is the appropriate result of trying to support your neighborhood, right? And how I talk about this a lot with domestic violence, Shauna. When you're in
Hmm.
a relationship that is abusive, right? You come into the relationship and it doesn't immediately begin as abusive. So you're like, your idea of what a relationship is quite narrow, right? Quite
That's
quite
right.
normal and narrow. And for those not watching, I'm like putting my hands up on either side of my face to
Yeah,
create a
yeah.
tunnel. And over the course of the abusive relationship, as the abuse grows, both emotional, physical, sexual, your idea of what is normal in a relationship grows with it. And so that tunnel gets wider and wider and wider and wider. to the
Oh.
point where you find yourself in a very abusive relationship, but you're not quite sure how you got there, right?
Mm.
And
Okay. Okay.
that's what this feels like, is we are inching towards
Hmm.
a greater degree of deadly force, and the deadly force is coming closer and closer to US citizens who have historically been the most protected, so white women, right?
Hmm.
That's a lesson. And then the other lesson I would say is just, again, the media ecosystems that we exist in and the echo chambers that we consume based on our political ideologies, and how this murder is being spun in the Fox News environment, and then how this is being talked about in the MSNBC or MS Now, I guess,
Hmm.
environment, and how critical it is that people are accessing their news from kind of center left, center, and center right news outlets who do a like moderately okay job, but at least you're going to get kind of a fuller picture, because if you are only hearing the Kristi Noems and the Trump statements and the Fox News belittling her because she's a lesbian and she has pronouns in her email, then
Hmm.
you're being propagandized. Is that a word? Propagandized.
We're gonna make it a word. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So they're the
Hmm.
lessons I think for me.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, so it's just I can't, it's just sad, right? It's just
Mm. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
it is. Oh, and another side note, just to add to this, be careful about spreading false information. We try to do a good job in
Yeah.
making sure we give you what we know based off of what's alleged. And also, too, we try to make sure if we do misspeak that we go back and correct what has been said. One of the things that I also saw
Mm-hmm.
floating around there in particular was Ross, the agent that we have on video doing what he did. There also is an unfortunate person in law enforcement in another police department entirely in another state that has the unfortunate instance of going by the exact same name.
Oh.
And so what people have now done is they've threatened and sent really bad messages to
Oh
his
my.
police department. Be careful, y'all. I want you to be vocal. Let me be clear on that. Continue to be vocal, but get your facts straight before you're vocal, because now you have someone else who is in law enforcement who has nothing to do with the situation,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
receiving some of the backlash that the backlash is warranted, but it's misdirected, y'all. Come
Yes.
on. Come
Yeah.
on. We got to do a little bit better
Yep.
on the right information. I even saw that the police department posted on their social media accounts, we know what happened in Minneapolis. We are not even in that state. We have a sergeant by the exact same name, but different person. Unfortunate.
Yeah.
Please get your facts straight, y'all. Do a little bit of research. Google. You'll look for, you'll shop for something longer on Amazon than you will for information. Look
Oh,
for your
great point.
information first,
Great point.
please. I'm begging you, because I don't want to drag in and misdirect important energy in the wrong
Yep.
direction, y'all.
Yep.
Come on. Let's do a little better. All right, Lisa. Well, with that, that's our solo phase
Mm-hmm.
for this time, but we thought it was apropos to jump on the mic and talk about this, especially that it's the week of MLK Day. And this is
Yep.
important, especially as we're
Yep.
thinking about communities and how we're trying to see each other as, at least some of us are trying to see others as human beings. How about that?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
with that, what we'll ask you to do, please share this episode with folks that are still trying to process what's happening. I'm sure by the time you hear this, hopefully we'll have some more information
Mm-hmm.
around the aftermath of all this. But don't forget, you can reach out to us on all your social media or podcast apps at Unfazed Unedited. Email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com, or simply visit our unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access new and old shows. And Lisa, I'll just add this call to action. Instead of always doing our call to action, how about just following Becca Good's call to action? Becca Good is the spouse of Renee Good. they've met and I mean blown away their goals with fundraising, give to another organization that shows
Yeah.
humanitarian efforts with your time, your money, your energy to honor Renee Good and her making the
Hmm.
ultimate sacrifice, y'all. All right. So
Yeah.
until next time.
Until next time, see you next week.